everyone, and welcome into the weekly Wednesday webinar where we're going to discuss some of the hot topics in the FedEx Ground world today. Before we do any of that, I'm going to read our disclaimer. I know it's everyone's favorite part of this show, but I'm going to run through it really quick, and then we're going to talk about some upcoming events as well as a few new listings that the brokerage has to offer you, the clients. But first, Route Consultant is not endorsed by and is not recommended by Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Route Consultant is not sponsored by, is not approved by, and is not associated with, nor has any connection whatsoever with Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. So now that that's out of the way, let's talk about a couple of our upcoming events. We're really excited. We're going to be in the St. Louis area hosting a happy hour for contractors and logistics professionals, as well as new investors on March the 19th. If you'd like to be a part of that, if you're in the St. Louis area, please go to our website. You can check out in the chat box right now a link to register for that event. We also have an up-and-coming happy hour in the Los Angeles market on April the 9th. Those will be our next two happy hours. And of course, now is the time to go ahead and register for the 2024 Contractor Party and Expo in beautiful Dallas, Texas. We'll have a link for you to register for that, as well as a link where you can go ahead and book your room now while we have really good rates on the room blocks. So please go to the website, click the links that we're going to put into the chat box, and get registered for those events. We can't wait to see you guys there. Now, really quick, before I bring Josh on to talk about today's content, we're going to go through some of our new listings. We have several that I want to touch on really quickly. First, out of Southern Wisconsin, we have 7 P&D routes offered at $990,000. A business that's running just north of 23% margins of EBITDA. They have 1 manager and 2 spare trucks with an assumable truck debt option on the deal structure there. Please reach out to us if you have questions about that. We also have, out of Northern Florida, 14 P&D routes priced at $1.6 million, running a very respectable 24% EBITDA margin, again, with 1 manager, 1 spare truck, and some assumable debt that you can structure into that deal, and a fleet that's comprised of mostly newer vehicles. Then out of Central Florida, 30 P&D routes priced at $2.115 million, 2 managers, 4 spare trucks, available for growth and contingency in a market that is about to integrate the express volume into the ground network, 2 full-time managers on staff, newer vehicles, and a very large roster of experienced and reliable drivers. Out of Central Florida, we have 11 P&D routes priced at $1.35 million. Running 26% margins, which is just a very, very, very high margin for these businesses to be running right now. An incredibly efficient operation. Could be SBA eligible. Again, a fleet comprised of mostly newer vehicles and a full-time manager on staff to help with the daily operations. 9 P&D routes priced at $600,000 out of Central Texas. Running a respectable 14% margin with a spare truck and a manager, a very low mileage operation with very low stem miles to boot. In Northern California, we have 14 P&D routes priced at $2.1 million, a business running just under 22.5% margins of EBITDA, 7 spare trucks, a full-time manager, assumable truck debt, and a very high potential of SBA eligibility. A full-time manager with spare trucks available to help with the maintenance needs, and of course the overflow come peak season. And last but most certainly not least, out of South Central Billings, Montana, to be exact, 2 line haul runs priced at $675,000. 2 dedicated team runs with 1 spare tractor to allow you to pick up some extra contingency work. And the business is an excellent opportunity for a hands-on contractor looking to grow in the line haul space. So now that we've gone through all that, I'm going to bring on Josh Gregory. He's going to talk to you guys today a little bit about some of the metal systems, rankings, all that good stuff, and some of the pitfalls you'd like to avoid as a FedEx Ground contractor. So without further ado, Josh, please join us.
Thanks, Danny. Always good to have you on here and to be here, not have to be here alone. Sometimes I do these webinars alone, so it's always good for me to have a co-host here. So thanks for the tee off in the intro. So like Danny was saying, whenever we talk about all kinds of parts of this industry, and we want to give you the full picture, the good and the bad. And so today, really what I'm focusing on is what happens when things go wrong in your business, and then what you should be doing and regularly tracking to keep yourself out of hot water. So traditionally, there have always been kind of 2 overarching buckets that are going to get you into trouble with FedEx. There's safety and there's service. There's also things that you need to be tracking and paying attention to in each of those categories so that you know where you stand. Now with the metals program, which is rolled out in pickup and delivery already and is rolling out in line haul in like the next few weeks. There are a couple of additional criteria that you need to be paying attention to as well beyond those two buckets. So I'll kind of talk about each of them and the things that you need to be doing and staying on top of to be successful here. So we're going to start with safety because it is the most important factor in keeping your contract in good standing. Bar none, period, end of sentence. That is the most important thing to track. There's other things that you can get in trouble for, but if you're in trouble on the safety side, that's when FedEx will walk you out the door faster than anything else. And it all comes back to the fact that we operate under FedEx's DOT number. So your accidents all go into that overall FedEx DOT score. And they're going to do everything that they can to protect their DOT number. Because if they lose it, they can't operate or they can't advertise as a national carrier in every state. So it's a huge detriment to their business, not to mention the insurance costs that'll continue to balloon if we don't continue to keep safety under control. So as an owner, you have to make safety the first and the last thought of every day so that you're thinking about it in the same way FedEx is. But your clearest understanding of all of this, of how you stand when it comes to safety, is your SRS. So bear with me as I go through a couple of FedEx acronyms, but your SRS is your safety results summary. And the SRS is the summary of basically everything that's happened to you over the last 36 months that have hurt your safety score. So the SRS is 36 months. From the SRS, there's the SRI. The SRI is the safety results indicator, which is a calculated number. And that is based on the last 12 months. And it's going to update every single month. Now, the important thing, you're mainly going to hear about the SRI. That's mainly what you're going to hear people talk about because it puts you into one of 5 safety tiers, which is really going to help you understand where you are and how FedEx sees you. So tier 5 is perfect. You have 0 incidents, nothing has hurt your score. So as you can imagine, there are very few contractors in this tier. Tier 4 is still very good, and most contractors are either in tier 4 or tier 3. The real thing to be paying attention to is once you get into tier 2, that's when you start to experience more concerns and more difficulties with FedEx. Now, for example, once you're in tier 2, the highest your metal status can be is silver. Typically, you're also going to be expected to provide some kind of rationale as to how you're going to improve the business once it gets down to that level. So you'll know how you got there, and you're basically going to have to give some kind of story, business plan for how you plan to get out of that tier 2. If you hit tier 1, the lowest tier for safety, the highest metal status that you can be at that point is bronze. And generally, hitting this tier means that you've had some kind of major issue on the safety side. And FedEx is almost always going to issue an opportunity to cure letter right then. And basically, that's a more serious action that they're issuing and requiring a written business plan for how you're going to improve it. But once you've hit that tier 1, that is a difficult place to be in, not only because you're going to be bronze metal, but also because of what we'll talk about in just a second in terms of the rolling 12 months. Because tier 1 and tier 2, now, as a comfort, it doesn't automatically mean you lose the business. But what it does mean is that there's been some kind of pattern that's led to a lower safety score. And since it's a rolling 12-month look back, it's not going to be an immediate rebound. It can take a little while for your score to rebound and to get back up into tier 3 or higher. So the most important thing when it comes to safety is this prevention and education so that you don't end up in the tiers at all. So a couple of just the biggest things that you need to be doing from day one as a new operator, and that all of you that are as contractors, if you're not doing any of these things, they need to be part of your rolling plan. So the first, you just have to have a clear training process, which thankfully training's a little bit easier now that there are standards, at least on the P&D side, around the qualification certification. It's a little more standardized in terms of the fact that your drivers have to actually be educated and good drivers before they can join your business. But you have to have that good, clear training process. And beyond just the training that's a part of, whatever different ground cloud or any different type of trainer that you're using for your driver, you also need to train them on what is required from your business. So, that's part of the onboarding, what their route looks like, what your expectation of them is as the owner and them as a driver. And so the other important part of it is having a really clear and clean employee handbook so that all of your drivers that you're putting on the road are aware of their responsibilities. And for those of you who've been in the business for a while, most of you probably have an employee handbook. But the thing I'd tell you is, when's the last time you updated it? A lot of you may have kept it for 5-10 years, and there could be a lot of things in there that don't apply anymore that you haven't updated it at all with some of these new metals things and new criteria that FedEx cares about. So I would take a good look at your employee handbook if you haven't done so in a while. You also need someone in your business, whether it's you or a BC, or it could even be a lead driver, or whoever it is, to be really fanatical about Vetter. So video event data recorders, those two-way cameras, that, the one facing out like a dash cam, the one facing in at your driver, that are used to provide information and video context on all of your drivers' behaviors. One, there are KPIs that are tied to Vetter that are going to affect your safety score. So a way that I see a lot of new contractors get into hot water is not realizing that the KPIs even exist, the KIs for Vetter. And if you don't track them, and maybe you've gone a few months and you haven't even realized that you're failing on the Vetter KIs, and suddenly you're already in a lower tier of safety than you should be, just because you didn't even realize there were things to track on the Vetter side. So no matter what, you should pay attention to it purely because contractually you have to. But it's also one of the best ways to make sure that you're coaching your drivers out of bad habits. And especially on your newest drivers, you want to do everything possible to catch those bad habits as early as possible and start to mold them into the right fit for your organization, the driver that you want them to be to really be successful. Because if you let a bad driver cement those bad habits, inevitably it's going to lead to an accident or some kind of event. And like I said, it's a 12-month rolling look back. So if you've done something and it still stays on your SRI because you allowed a bad habit to exist, it's not just a one-time thing. It's going to affect you for a year. So really pay attention to those. Prevention is the most important thing there. Another important thing is just to have safety meetings at the terminal, whether it's you or a BC, and to not let anything slide. You really want to create a culture of safety where your drivers know the expectations and are proud to represent your company. That culture is really important for the mindset of your drivers and helping to ensure that they are treating the job in the way that you want them to, and really being conscious of those things on a daily basis. Now, that's the kind of the key things you need to be thinking around safety. Like I said, I wanted to harp on it because it's important. It's the number one thing. But as I've mentioned a couple of times, the other important way that FedEx is now tracking you is through your metal rating. Now, 2 weeks ago, I went in depth on some of this, and I talked about the new Spotlight dashboard, which if you haven't dug into, you should. That's actually really helpful data that's in MyGroundBiz that FedEx is providing that gives you pretty granular data on how you're doing at a revenue level, stop level, that is more useful than a lot of things I've seen from them. But just as a quick reminder, metals, if you haven't heard about them, there's 3 tiers: silver, bronze, silver, gold, that all contractors are placed in. And knowing which category you're in and which way you're trending is crucial to the health of your contract. Regardless of how you feel about the system and how you feel about the rating metric, it's invaluable to know the way that your customer, FedEx, is currently viewing you and the areas that they're expecting you to improve in. Like I said, we can talk all day about if it's a good or bad rating system, but you need to know and pay attention to how they are treating you or how they are viewing you and what direction they think you're going, up or down. So for P&D, there's those 4 criteria that you need to be monitoring to keep yourself in good status. First is safety, which we've already talked about, and it's 40% of the rating. It's the most important criteria. The second is service, and this is really just tracking your ability to deliver and pick up packages successfully. It's 35% of your rating, so it's still really high, not quite as high as safety, but it's still very important. So a couple of those things, you're trying to stay above 99% on a monthly average in terms of the packages delivered, your ILS score, and trying to make sure you're not missing pickup windows, not late for those pickups. And with Express, there's a whole separate service as well. But service is always going to be an important criteria and something that you're going to have to be paying attention to on a daily basis. And it's often what your managers are paying the most attention to outside of safety, is making sure that all those packages get delivered. Because when there are package mistakes, often the manager's the one who has to deal with it first and hear from FedEx. So they should be the ones thinking about it in addition to safety. But the last two are the newer criteria on the P&D side because they're strictly tied to metals. We didn't really worry about these to this extent before metals. And the first is customer experience, which is just tracking to make sure that you're meeting customer expectations, and those are heavily affected and heavily impacted by your ride score, the Rate Your Driver program. And then the last one is productivity. And that's really tracking how efficiently you are utilizing your resources to deliver to your territory versus how FedEx is charting you should be using, how many resources you should be using. So the real thing that you should be thinking about is that's a stack ranking of the things that you need to be tracking and monitoring daily and weekly. So safety, service, customer experience, and then productivity. So those are the four, and that's really how you need to be viewing your business, at least in terms of that. We know that that's how FedEx views your business. And so balancing those is crucial to stay in good standing with FedEx. And even beyond that, this is a little bit grayer. We don't, they're not super clear on how much it impacts it, but they've basically said that the gold status contractors are potentially going to have more opportunity to expand and maybe have new opportunities at the terminal they're in, new contingency opportunities, or maybe they're the first ones called for new opportunities at other terminals. Doesn't mean if you're silver, you don't get those, but there is kind of an understanding or a description from FedEx that gold should mean you are the first chosen for new opportunities. Now, so that's something to think about. Maybe if you're just silver trending gold, you know that you're going to have an advantage there. So again, that's what's important to kind of stack, rank, and balance. Now, I'll say on the line haul side, metals aren't quite out, but they are coming next month, and we know enough about them where it should already start to impact how you're thinking about the business. So we talked about some of it last week too, and we had Alex Froome on here to talk through the update and the announcement. So if you haven't seen that, you can go back and watch that. But really, the stack ranking, the three criteria for line haul are safety, service, and availability. So again, safety is still the most important, and service is second. So for service, when we're talking line haul, it's how well you've met the delivery windows of the runs that you've taken on and made sure that you've successfully delivered on time. And then availability is the third metric, which is tracking, how many runs you've declined during the year and how that tracks versus your availability score for the year. And so that's your priority stack for line haul. So again, P&D or line haul, this is really just knowing if I'm failing or suffering in any of these categories. It's a really good indicator for me that FedEx is also viewing me as a potential risk. And so, you're kind of trying to balance all of those as you're thinking about your business. Now, the good news is, for those of you who are new investors, if you're buying a business, you don't inherit the metal status of the person you're buying from. You do start fresh. And basically, after you've operated for 3 months, then they'll assign you a metal status. You also start as a tier 5 safety. You start completely clean. But that being said, it's still incredibly important to understand how all of these scores work. Because like I said, prevention is the most important way to stay clean so that you can keep that clean slate clean for as long as possible. So really, as much as you can, you're trying to make it where it never becomes an issue. And then when you're trying to figure out how to start to, work your way up from a metal status standpoint, FedEx will give you kind of the indications of where you need to improve. And that's the stack rank of what you need to improve first. Now, what it comes down to, and what it will always come down to, is that you have to know what FedEx uses to judge and classify you, and then pay really close attention to how that criteria affect both your business and your profitability. And this is key, because there may be times where it's better for your profitability to be average or below average in some categories, as long as you're performing really well in something like safety or service. So the biggest thing I'd tell you on an ongoing basis is that you want to understand essentially what are the ranges of acceptable operation, and then build a business plan to stay in those ranges, maximize your profitability, and then have contingency plans for when inevitably something or everything decides to break on the same day, and try to be prepared for those scenarios so that it doesn't have a huge impact on your business. Now, there's all kinds of things to think about here. And if anyone has questions on the specific process of what may happen on the back end if you get down to the road where potentially FedEx is looking at terminating. I can talk through all that if you have questions on it, but it can get kind of monotonous, so I'll save it. But ultimately, what I would say is we're always here to review your business plan around these programs. We can give advice, and ultimately, we're always trying to find ways to help get you into a healthier place with your business. So if you have questions on how any of that is working for your current business or for a business that you're looking at, we are always happy to help and jump in any of those scenarios. So that's the main things of what I wanted to cover today on that. So if anyone has any questions, whether on what we talked about today or anything about the space, you got a few minutes to type it into the Q&A if you want those questions answered. Otherwise, we can, we'll give you a couple of seconds while you're typing.
Yeah, that's good stuff. That's all so relevant. I mean, it comes up so often in discussions with both buyers and sellers, Josh. Everyone on the P&D side knows the metals are kind of the key indicator as to the health of a business's performance in FedEx's eyes. And it's going to come and hit the line haul side very soon. I will say that what you were talking about as far as the employee handbook and keeping that up to date and relevant and reviewing that on an annual basis is so important. I did a webinar earlier this year with our director of HR, Melody Sunwall. That's on our YouTube channel. I would highly recommend you guys review that and kind of how she really looks at what a handbook should really mean to you and your business and how it can insulate you from all kinds of issues on the legal side, the liability side, and of course the FedEx side operationally. So like Josh was saying, we're going to dive into our Q&A section. If you go to the bottom of your screen, you will see a chat box as well as a Q&A box. Don't type your questions into the chat box because it confuses me. Type them into the Q&A box and we'll get to them in due order. Go ahead and start dumping those in. Whatever you guys have to talk about, we'd be happy to. Josh, do we have a hard date on when the metal system is officially going to start hitting the line haul space? Is it going to go region by region? What do you know about that?
So they're not going to just tell it to you, but starting in your business meetings that start next month, you can ask for your metal status already as a line haul contractor. So in a couple of weeks, you should be able to get that from the terminal and find out where you stand today. And they may provide trending data already, or they may not in terms of this first conversation, but you should be able to get your current metal status at least in the next few weeks in the business review meetings that are coming up.
Beautiful, beautiful. Is there any indication as to how the metals are going to be affected as far as express integration to these P&D contracts is concerned? Is that going to hit their metal scores and their service scores the same as their traditional ground and e-commerce volume will, or is there a different metric for scoring that?
Yeah, so Express is scored on the service metrics. They have a separate service metric for it, but it wouldn't shock me if at some point, once Express is fully rolled out, that they add it as some part of the metal system. They've already tweaked those ratings and the criteria a couple of times since the rollout. So, I will see. What I would say though is, they really need that to be rolled out to a higher percentage of the country before they can actually affect in detail the metal system for everyone. From an express standpoint, but I wouldn't be shocked if that became some kind of other additional criteria.
Very, very interesting. All right, folks. Well, we're not seeing a ton pop up into the Q&A section. We'll give you guys a couple more moments here to get anything in there. We don't want to bug you if you don't have questions for us. Josh, maybe you're just so thorough they don't need any more help. That must be it. You will see in the chat box, we did put in there info@routeconsultant.com. That is the catch-all email for any questions that you have. If any of the listings that I mentioned at the start of the program, the webinar today, interest you, please reach out, or you can find those same listings on our website. We'd be happy to talk to you about any and all of those. We'll get you connected to the right broker or sales director that's managing that opportunity. And then as far as the events we talked about, March 19th, again, for the St. Louis Happy Hour, you can register for that on the website right now, routeconsultant.com. There's an events tab right there. It'll break down everything we're doing this entire calendar year. Our events team has done a great job getting that all on the website for you so you guys can plan accordingly. Make sure you're registering for the expo. Going once, going twice on questions. Josh, we might just go ahead and call it.
Sold. All right. Well, it was great having everybody. And Danny, again, it's always a pleasure having you on here as well.
No, I love doing it, guys. If you need any help, reach out to me. Daniel.robinson@routeconsultant.com. I'm always available. Thanks for being here, guys. We'll see you.
Yeah.